Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of year again with the ITA All-American Championships happening as we speak. We have our very own college tennis insider with John Parsons from No Ad, No Problem. John, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always great to see your face when college tennis is happening, and we're almost in full-fledged mode right now.
Yeah, I know when I'm talking to and I get the invite that something big is happening in the college tennis space. And so we certainly are all turning our attention this week to Tulsa and Cary as the fall has officially really kicked off.
And you've already done if you want to listen to John's podcast on No Ad, No Problem, make sure to check out the show notes or the description if you're watching this on YouTube to listen to his preview. But John, coming into this year, what are you most looking forward to? Has anything caught your eye so far coming into All Americans?
Well, I think some big storylines this year on the women's side, it feels like a resetting of the deck. I mean, the
Mhm.
past few years on the women's side have really been dominated by Dasha Vidmanova of Georgia and Mary Stoyana of Texas A&M. They both graduate last year onto the Pro Tour. And so you're sort of looking for who will emerge and take that top spot. I think that's one storyline on the women's side. On the men's side, it feels like we have a few incumbents, if you will, in Michael Zhang, maybe in Rafa Hadar, the freshman last year. Neither of them are playing All-Americans and potentially not playing this fall. So you might have a resetting of the deck storyline for all of college tennis, both men and women, as you have space for a lot of new faces to emerge. And certainly we saw that last season in All-Americans on the women's side. You had Maria Sholokova of Wisconsin emerge and become the first All-American winner from Wisconsin, and certainly didn't expect her to win that event. So All-Americans is always interesting because there is so many new faces. There are players who are coming in after a really strong summer, other players who maybe had an internship and didn't play as much. So it can really vary. It can be pretty volatile, but it sort of sets the foundation for what is to come, which is ultimately leading up to NCAAs in the fall.
So when you look at some of the results, and like I said before, All Americans has started. A lot of results have been coming in. First rounds are essentially done as we speak. But the biggest storyline coming out of today, we're recording this on a Wednesday evening on the East Coast. DJ Bennett, the number one player in the country, excuse me, not the world, has
Not
bowed
yet.
out. Not yet, not yet. Good point, bowed out in the first round to Appalachian State in singles, and doubles she lost today as well. When you see a result like that this early, how much stock do you take into this going into the rest of the season or NCAAs later in November?
Well, it means she hasn't qualified yet for NCAAs. I think that what's interesting on the women's side is DJ Bennett is your defending NCAA finalist. She comes in as that number one ranked player with the departure of Vidmanova and Stoyana. That's a very different role for DJ Bennett. In her entire collegiate career, she's been more of the hunter rather than the hunted.
Hmm.
And now that has changed for her. It's a different type of pressure, particularly now as a senior leading a very young Auburn team.
Hmm.
And so my guess is that's a lot of what she's dealing with now.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't put a ton of stock into it yet. You
Hmm.
know, two players that didn't make the main draw finals last year, or even the semifinals, were Stoyana and Vidmanova on the women's
Hmm.
side last year. They had to qualify by making the backdraw final.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of time left to qualify for NCAAs. Certainly, there'll be something to monitor if these sorts of results continue for DJ
Hmm.
throughout the season, but I think it'll take a little bit more time acclimating to being that number one player. We've seen players struggle coming into the season. Stefan Dostanic is a player who was preseason number one and had his worst season ever. In that was his junior year at USC. So, it's a different type of pressure.
It's definitely a different type of pressure. And when you have players that are already have that numerical value right next to their name, it's hard to see anything else but, right? And especially in college tennis, it can fluctuate so quickly. And this is the perfect example of it today with her. And when you see other players like Antoine from Kentucky, he lost today in his first round, and he had a really good summer playing in challenger level. competition. It's things like that that you really take notice of, and hopefully it doesn't last as long when you go into the rest of the season.
Yeah, and there's a lot of freshmen as well that maybe don't start to play at the level you expect. So I was surprised to see Mayu Crossley, the number one freshman newcomer at UCLA, who has a WTA high of 350. She goes out in the first round to Emily Sartz-Lunde of Michigan. There's all sorts of different pressure coming and playing for your school and trying to live up to a certain expectation, either from what you think you have done outside of college or kind of being a highly ranked player now or a top seed. And it's always tough with the preseason rankings because that number one ranking wasn't necessarily earned, right? It was
Hmm.
given to you by the departure of players above you. In the
Hmm.
case of DJ Bennett. And same with all the rest of these seedings, right? Like
Hmm.
Luciana Perry at number three, she wins today, but she didn't finish last season as number three. That's a
Hmm.
place she hasn't been before. So there's a lot of different pressures that mount here in the fall season, particularly with this first tournament All-Americans.
And that wasn't the only this isn't the only individual competition that's been happening lately. You mentioned Battle of the Bay in one of your podcasts recently. I made a video on it. You see players like Anastasia Grichkina win her double. You have Duncan Chan from TCU winning the double as well. When you see players like that go through competition, especially when Duncan played Ozan in the final, and that's back to back. Is that back to back final? No, Ozan lost last year to Carl, but won it in 23. Correct?
I forget. I think it was like the quarterfinals. He lost to Carl
Yes.
Van Overbeek of Cal last season,
But
and
Ozan's made two Battle of the Bay finals, won one, lost
yeah, so
one.
that would have been the year before.
That would have been the year before. But when you see players like that, and Ozan, I believe, won today. Matty Forbes also won from Michigan State as well today, as well against a very tough Martin from NC State as well.
Borshik, yeah, from NC
Yeah,
State.
and he's a problem on NC State's roster as well. When you see guys like that already making noise, it's cool to see those kind of stories. And if you were to look back at and I know I didn't prep you with this question, but Battle of the Bay, when you see that kind of competition, does that make you think of other players that you need to watch out for?
Well, I mean, highlighted Duncan Chan certainly was a surprise winner there. It reminded me very similarly to Louis Maxted's run at Battle in Bay. Last year of TCU, he knocked out Jay Friend there,
Hmm.
and he went on to have a fantastic senior season. I expect we'll see something very similar with Duncan Chan of TCU. That was certainly the biggest result from Battle in the Bay. I think a noteworthy result as well was Lucia Pyre back for Oklahoma State after being out with injury all of last season due to her ACL injury she
Hmm.
suffered in the 2024 round of 16. Also, you have Rose Nijkamp of Oklahoma State getting more action in these fall events. She did not play in the fall. She showed up in January. So
Hmm.
those were some other names that we saw in the mix in Battle in the Bay, who we've also now seen in the main draw of the All-Americans.
So if you, excuse me, if you were to take a couple players that you think could make a splash in the 25-26 season, who are some players that people should look out for or players that should catch your eye on the college tennis tour?
You! Please subscribe. Thanks.
I mean, at this point, there's so many players that you could really look to. We're starting to see so many players have success on the tour. I mean, I think players outside of that top 10 that I would circle this season. One is Nick Kotzen of Columbia. So he's a senior. I thought he played some of his best tennis last season in that number two spot. And particularly if Michael Zhang takes off the fall and whether or not he comes back in the spring, I think a lot will be asked of Nick Kotzen, particularly if he's really that senior leader who will be on campus maybe more often.
Hmm.
Had some good results on the ITF Pro circuit, so I'll be very curious to see his results. Another player who I feel like we've always been waiting to really emerge on the collegiate scene is Trevor Svajda.
Hmm.
So Trevor Svajda, younger brother of Zach Svajda, he's a Kalamazoo finalist. He just recently made his first challenger final in Winston-Salem,
Hmm.
but we've never really seen him totally break through in college. And so this is his third year at school. So I would circle him as someone that could make a big splash and see how far he can take that SMU team.
Mhm.
So those are two players I'm very curious about that are kind of outside of the top 10 on the men's side.
On the men's side, in the women's side, I wanted to ask you in terms of the Texas A&M and Georgia teams, who do you think has a chance to kind of, I'm not going to say replace because you're replacing two of the best college tennis players we've seen. And I, you and Gruskin have mentioned like Dasha's in the category of one of the best college tennis players ever when it comes to this level. But if you were to pick someone to kind of replace or to look out for that caliber on the women's side, is there anyone that can replace them or can
Yeah.
come close to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is Reese Brantmeyer's season.
Yeah.
I think Reese Brantmeyer has always been on that level. You look at her victory over Dasha Vidmanova just a few matches back from injury in February of last year. She beats Vidmanova in that match. Reese Brantmeyer has always had this level ever since coming into college, but
Hmm.
she has struggled with injuries so much over the course of her career and in college. And so this is her final year at North Carolina, assuming she doesn't get granted any additional eligibility. And she is so strong both in singles and in doubles. She is someone that if you told me she won NCAAs this fall in both singles and doubles, I would absolutely believe it.
Hmm.
And I think North Carolina is going to be very strong this year, and I think that they're going to ride her at that number one spot. So she certainly can elevate, and it would be great to just see a fully year of Reese Brantmeier.
Hmm.
We've never seen that. Freshman year she wasn't able to play the fall. She gets injured at indoors in 2024,
Yeah.
not a full season there. And then this year, hopefully we can see her end to end, but she's certainly the player you look to circle as sort of the heir apparent
Hmm.
to, a Dasha or a Mary.
And is North Carolina your top one of your top two schools for favorites, I guess, for this year? Because there's Georgia has a lot of pressure to repeat. They lost their two of their best players. A&M hard to replace Mary. Who would you say are your top two teams on the women's side to kind of compete this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think talent-wise, there's
Hmm.
probably three teams
Okay.
that are in the mix on paper, and that would be Georgia, despite the massive absences. Like they
Hmm.
bring in an extremely talented
Oh yeah.
freshman class. Now, that's always a question mark. You're right. I mean, how well are they going to perform in college? But they've certainly reloaded.
Hmm.
The second is North Carolina, so they bring in Obi Kajuru, transferring in from Oklahoma State. They return everyone else pretty much from
Yeah.
last season with the exception of Carson Tangillig. And so that's a pretty fair trade. And obviously they make the NCAA semifinals last year.
Hmm.
And then the other team on paper is Oklahoma State.
Hmm.
They return allegedly everyone. We're not seeing Melissa Ericon play this fall. So will she come back? Not sure. But those three teams on paper, I would say are the
Hmm.
most talented teams coming into the season.
I, I I hate to bring up the Chris Young impact or the impact that this has on the team, but do you think this is coming into this season? It's been hard from a outside looking in perspective of how do you still compete after what just happened, especially to some of the girls that were on these teams that won ITA indoors, and you have new girls coming in as well. You have a Big 12 Player of the Year, Olivia Linzer, coming into the team as well, and then all of a sudden, the guy who recruits her is gone, and now she has to adapt to not only new teammates but new coaching staff as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the stripping of the indoor title and essentially that entire season, right, vacating all of those wins and the number one ranking and all of that, that probably really only impacts the players that were on the team when that happened, of
Hmm.
which at this point it's just Komar, right?
Okay.
All these other players have moved on or have
Hmm.
graduated. So I'm not sure how much this impacts the rest of the players that are on the team other than just the coaching change, right? But a
Hmm.
lot of the recruits, have a good relationship with, at the time, the assistant coach. Maybe he was the one that was recruiting them in. He's now the
Hmm.
head coach.
Hmm.
But I do think there's probably going to be some chip on the shoulder, right? To
Hmm.
feel like you are targeted as like a team or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, so we'll see. I mean, on talent, they should absolutely make a deep NCAA run,
Hmm.
but it's going to be a big question mark.
It is. It is. And if we look at the men's side too, when you look at who's still here in college tennis and you have all these players, I mean, on paper, for some reason, I have a. If Rafa plays the whole year and Kennedy coming in, does is Virginia a top five team in the country coming into the men's season?
Yeah, I mean, I think Virginia is a top five team, period. Like
Hmm.
whether or not they get, the new additions in January. I expect we will see some additions
Hmm.
for this Virginia squad, but they have Hadar, they have Dylan Dietrich, they
Hmm.
have Keegan Rice, who looks to make like a sophomore jump there. So there's a lot of talent on that team, and I think Hadar coming back is a huge boost to them.
Hmm.
That's a pretty known quantity. You look at some of these other top teams from last season. Texas, you're going to have that Lagu question hanging over them all season long.
Oh
Is
yeah.
he eligible? Is he not eligible? Right?
Hmm.
If he comes back, they're right back in the mix as well. TCU, I expect we're going to get more January additions from them. Wake Forest, they've brought in some transfers, but they lost a lot last season. Ohio State on paper might be one of the deepest teams in the
Yeah.
country. So they got a ton of guys there with above 13 UTRs, but that's also sort of the story every season, right? And
Yeah.
they haven't been able to get over the hump in the outdoor season. So it's going to be the same teams in the mix this year on the
Okay.
men's side. I don't think we're going to see too much mix up. So I would expect that kind of these perennial teams are going to be back in the mix towards the end of May.
Well, one team that I was thinking about while you were mentioning Ohio State is UCLA. After UCLA winning the Big Ten championship and then Kalen leaving to go pro, which was, I, no offense to him, but he wins Junior French Open, but 1 year and you're gone? Is it
Yeah, I mean,
like,
certainly the pro results haven't been there. He lost to teammates, Emin Van Lobenzels and Spencer Johnson this summer
mhm,
on tour. So, I think when people have their mindset on something, it's hard
yeah,
to get them away from it, and everyone's going to have their own path. I
yep,
was surprised that he made that decision, but, he will rep college tennis forever onward. So, wishing
mhm.
him the best of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, it could be like a Learner situation. Learner played at USC and didn't really play that much for the team and then went pro. So it could be kind of a similar situation in that regard. And is UCLA the same team this year to kind of stun everyone in the Big Ten like they did last year?
Well, they're not going to stun anyone anymore because of what they did last year, right? And that was a huge forward step for them
Hmm.
after a few years of really struggling there. They
Hmm.
bring in Andy Nguyen, who had played number two for UC Irvine. I love that addition. Fantastic player, Southern Cal kid. Uh, Rudy Kwan does not seem to be playing this fall, so whether or not he comes back in the spring is also now an open question.
Hmm.
But I think they'll probably be around the same level they were last season.
Okay.
The big unknown moving forward in college tennis is it's not good enough to just count your chickens, like
Hmm.
to know what you look like today, just because you don't know what these other programs are going to bring in January. So
Yeah.
sitting here right now, I don't know if you return the same sort of roster as last year, do you actually move up, or are you
Yeah.
regressing if other teams are bringing in new talent in January?
Yeah, absolutely. And in that regard too, looking at individual talent is, I mean, we have the individual championships this fall slash winter, November again. And when we look at the top talent competing abroad and playing in challengers and seeing what some of these players are doing, I mean, Ollie Tarvit's coming back to college, and but he could not be playing the fall because he's going to be taking it to play pro tournaments. So when you see, and he's last year's ITA national champion. So it's like when you see guys like that, are you a little bit worried about who's going to be competing for the individual national championships in November?
Yeah, I think it's an existential question for college tennis. This is the
Hmm.
second year of playing NCAAs in the fall. I think we're already seeing more absences. You mentioned it. Ollie Tarvet is not playing. You have Americans as well are
Yeah.
opting out, like a Samir Banerjee of Stanford.
Yep.
That doesn't happen in years past, right? Where players opt out of playing NCAAs. You have a lot of women players this week who are deciding to play a W35 in Berkeley or a W75 in Templeton
Yeah.
and not play All Americans and likely take sort of that fall off. I mean,
Hmm.
we're very much in a world right now where for the very elite players, yes, we're able to get them to come play college, but they're operating more like college as a vehicle to support their pro career, and the
Hmm.
tax they have to pay is play these college events. And I don't think that that's a sustainable model for college tennis moving forward.
Hmm.
For these events to matter and for people to care about them, you need the best players to compete in them.
I don't. Well, it became the incentive, right? And this has been a conversation for the last year or so with having NCAAs being moved to the fall, winners of the NCAA not being in the US Open. I mean, you had Michael Zhang win the NCAAs, then he plays the college playoff, makes the final, doesn't make main draw, still plays qualifying, but wins a challenger weeks before. And you see the level of talent that he's there with, and he's already top 300 right now, like after this past week. So does Michael still have the incentive to play NCAA since he's already completed it? And you
Yeah.
have players like that, like Rafa Hadar, also on the winning at the challenger level that are representing UVA, and it kind of hurts. It hurts, but it also doesn't. Like it's great to see all these guys representing on an international scale, but then you look at the competition, and then you're going, okay, they'll play for their team in the spring, and they look like a completely different animal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a question of like do they go off and represent their college in these pro events? I mean, some
Hmm.
absolutely. Like I think Michael Zhang is a incredible ambassador for college
Hmm.
tennis, and he's likely going to be here for all 4 years. The development and the improvements he's made year after year, and now he's starting to dip his toe more into pro events in a way he
Hmm.
didn't last year, and he's earned his ability to do that given his success.
Hmm.
We're seeing a lot of players who are just dipping in for the spring season, cashing a check, and then using that school to fund their travel to these other pro events.
Hmm.
That to me is not a sustainable model
No.
and is not something that will get fans, new fans into college tennis. And so I think that's the concerning trend I'm seeing in college tennis. It's not the Michael Zhangs of the world who, if he decides not to play NCAAs this fall, I mean, you can't blame him, right? There isn't an incentive there other than pride, school pride,
Hmm.
accolades, right? And I do think for many of these players, playing in NCAAs and being an NCAA champion will very likely be the highlight of their entire tennis career.
Yeah,
I
and
think that's lost on 18, 19-year-olds, but I think as we get older, I think most of us can realize that.
that's where it becomes one of those where you're still questioning who's still going to college, right? And we saw that with recent additions. You mentioned someone who just committed to Ohio State. Who?
Yeah, Victor Lilov.
Thank you. He's the same age as Ozon, correct?
Yeah, he was that same high school class as Ozan, Sebastian Gorsny, Jack Anthrop, or maybe not because he was a redshirt, but those guys that are now seniors in college.
So then you have almost like a Timo Legoux situation where you can then commit back to college to then represent a school, but still come in at 21. And I think one thing I've mentioned to a couple people, and I don't think I've mentioned this to you yet, but tennis is starting to become like a junior college, like the NHL, where you're drafting 21, 22-year olds that are full grown adults playing college tennis, which is great for one level, but also hinders the ability to keep it on the same path, right? It doesn't become a path of growing. It's just who can bring in more to build the better roster. And that can be a good thing and can be a bad thing. But when I see recruits like that, it does make me just kind of raise your eyebrow a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Lilov example, the reason why that stands out is because he is American.
Yeah.
And for many years, we've been seeing non-Americans take this route, right? Like
Hmm.
try their hand at the Pro Tour 2, 3 years,
Hmm.
say, this really isn't cutting it for me,
Hmm.
particularly now that we can find workarounds to get paid going to college, or at minimum, they'll pay for my travel and my coaching. Great, let me go to college. And that
Hmm.
always became a little hairy because it was like, well, when did they really graduate high school, etc. But on the American side, you didn't see that as much because it was a little bit more cut and dry. So I
Hmm.
think that we're seeing that with Lilov. It opens up sort of what will now become Pandora's box of, yeah, I mean, there are no real restrictions anymore from bringing players in. The eligibility rules that the NCAA governs from continue to deteriorate every day as they get
Hmm.
more and more lawsuits. So we're only going to see more of this. Now it's just a question of how sustainable it is on the money side. Like if I'm an AD, it doesn't really make a ton of sense to me to be supporting and paying for these players to go play pro events.
Hmm.
Like that was one of the reasons why a lot of ADs questioned the reason for having a fall schedule if there was no NCAAs because they're like, don't
Hmm.
we compete for NCAA championships? And so
Hmm.
I find it hard to believe that many of them can rationalize, oh yeah, let's send, 5 players off to 10 different pro tournaments events.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to make sense to the bottom line.
And that comes down to budget as well. And when you see all these players and talking to coaches and talking to them about how they have to schedule out the next 12 to 18 months for some of these players, you have to take into account the tournaments that they're playing, who's going with them, where they're playing, how they're playing. It becomes that costly effect of, okay, we're going to support you, but we could possibly only be supporting two or three of you versus the entire team to play some of these events.
Yeah, I mean, they have to make real budget decisions. What coaches are they going to send? It's much more costly to spend a week traveling to 3 different places than it is to kind of bus everyone or fly everyone to one place and kind of share rooms there. So, yeah, I don't see how it's going to be super sustainable for many of these programs moving forward, but it's very clear that coaches are going to be willing to bend over backwards for any of these elite players who want to come to college and take advantage of the resources here. If I was a top junior or a top fledgling pro player, like I would do it too. I can
Yeah.
make 100 grand and I can get free coaching and resourcing and facilities I can't get today. It's much more appealing than grinding it on a 15K
Oh
somewhere.
yeah. Oh yeah.
But to me, at some point, and I think we've reached it, the level of college tennis continue to increase isn't actually reaping the rewards, right? It's
Gotcha.
not necessarily bringing in new fans just
Hmm.
because we have more ATP 500 players or WTA 500 players.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bigger issue is you see all these other college sports that continue to grow from a butts and seats standpoint, continue to grow from a broadcast perspective.
Yeah.
And yeah, their level's getting better as well, but I don't think it's just we need to bring in more pro players. We got to do different things.
I totally agree with you, John, and I do appreciate your time to talk to us and to give us a little bit of a preview for this upcoming season. Is is there any? I'm trying to think. For if I was to just quickly ask you, national champion at the end of the year for men and women, who do you think it's going to
Oh man.
be?
Uh, I, I mean, I feel ill-equipped to answer that right now because
Okay.
again, the January editions are so significant at this point, right? They
Okay.
really are game changers. And you look at, 6 of the 8 men's teams last season had starting players that came in January. Many
Yeah.
had more than just one. On the
Yeah.
women's side, it was 5 of 8, and
Hmm.
many of them, you look at LSU's in 3 last year, were players who played their first collegiate match in January.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can tell you right now who the teams are with the talent on their paper, but I can't predict the future in that regard and what the
That's fair.
roster will look like, and that's going to be conversation for January, and at this point, sometimes February.
That it's really true. So, John, thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. If you aren't following John already, Jay Tweets Tennis on X/Twitter. Make sure to follow No Ad No Problem on Instagram, as well as his podcast on Spotify and all podcast platforms. John, thank you so much for joining us. I really do. I don't even know what I'm doing with this outro. Thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it, man. It's always fun talking
Thanks
to
for
you.
having me.
Absolutely.